this next tweet, actually, and I'll just go ahead and read what it says here. It says by a member of this committee, the FDA should not approve the COVID vaccines. There are too many reports of infection and spread of COVID-19 among vaccinated people. I'm just clearly pointing out facts from public statements.
The chair reminds the gentleman from California to observe proper decorum. It is a violation of House rules and the rules of this committee to engage in personalities regarding other members or to question the motives of a colleague.
Donald Trump has ordered Speaker Johnson essentially to block any border bill so that he could cause, of course, more chaos, in my opinion, along the border.
I just want to comment, because he's not here to defend himself. I know Mike Johnson. I know Mike Johnson since he came in the legislature before Donald Trump was president. I'm sure Mike Johnson doesn't have to wait for Donald Trump's orders to say that that bipartisan bill is inadequate. I mean, that's just a slander against him when he's not here. I'm sure he's not doing that because Donald Trump ordered him to.
I mean, I think he said so on Fox News that he was doing that, actually. That's exactly what he said. And he actually has been taking the exact direction of Donald Trump and has said so publicly in their conversations. But I'll continue.
And tonight we're here to hold Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress. And this committee needs to be able to proceed forward to do that. I'd also like to remind the committee and anyone watching this that every single time we hold a committee hearing and oversight committee, the Democrats attack President Trump repeatedly. Doesn't matter what the issue is, doesn't matter what the topic is, they can't produce facts. They can't produce anything to make their arguments. They make it about personal character attacks on the former president of the United States and our Republican presidential candidate.
Yes, gentle lady from Georgia, we're going to talk about that Donald Trump who stole classified materials and stored them in his bathroom. And as much as the gentle lady from Georgia and others may not like it, we know that Trump's public statements have been crazy and incoherent for years. And we know that he is too tired and sleepy to stay awake through his own criminal trial. It's not President Biden who's not sharp. It's, in fact, Donald Trump. Now, Attorney General Garland set up a parallel investigation of President Biden's handling of classified documents as well. And that shows the Department of Justice is actually fair and independent. So to oversee this investigation, he appointed Robert Hur, a former U.S. attorney handpicked by Donald Trump. Robert Hur found no wrongdoing by President Biden. No wrongdoing by President Biden. But he chose to smear President Biden with a totally unprofessional and wrong assessment of the president's age and mental sharpness. Now, as we know, his assessment about President Biden was wrong because you can literally yourself read the transcript, which is over 250 pages long. Now, many of us, especially us Democrats, know the president. He is sharp. He is focused on the big issues. He's dealing with large challenges across the world. Now, the majority is hyping up this issue to distract us from the fact that Donald Trump keeps embarrassing himself in public. I'm only going to talk about public reporting. His criminal trial started on April 15th, and here's a summary of the press reports. On his first day of his trial, Reuters reported that Trump appeared to doze off during jury selection. On April 16th, it was reported that Trump dropped his head inside the courtroom, keeping his eyes closed before jolting his head upright. On April 19th, the New York Times reported Trump's eyes remained, quote, closed for extended periods during the final day of jury selection. On April 22nd, MSNBC reported that Trump's lawyers were fighting to keep him awake. On April 30th, NBC and the New York Times reported that Trump nodded off for significant portions of witness testimony, and as we all know, basically kept his eyes closed for hours and hours on end. On May 9th, Trump's eyes remained closed for many minutes, and Trump later, of course, dozed on and off. And the reports go on and on. May 13th, Trump was, quote, asleep during the afternoon session. On May 14th, a political reporter said Trump slouched in his seat and closed his eyes and his mouth. Now, here we have a photo of Donald Trump, of course, through some of his trial. And I bring this up because it's Donald Trump that's asleep and that's hurting and dividing our country. And this attack on President Biden and his mental acuteness or his ability or his age is completely just a reason and an excuse for the Republicans to continue to attack President Biden when we all know that Donald Trump is the one that's unfit to be president. And that's why the majority is so desperate to be here today, because they want to help him get elected and hurt President Biden. Well, it's not going to work, and with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I just want to apologize to the American people. I don't think that this is the best use of our time when we are squabbling. It's one thing to have fun and laugh as members of Congress and try to find humor or some sort of lightheartedness in what we are doing. But when things get as heated as they have, it's unfortunately an embarrassment on our body as a whole. And so I just want to personally apologize to the American people for that. In my remaining 1 minute, I could request, every so often, Mr. Garcia, maybe you could just lift up that picture of our President Trump sleeping. As you say, I think he's praying. But if he is sleeping, he certainly looks pretty while he sleeps. Maybe it's an endearing moment of prayer, though. I know when I fall asleep on airplanes, my mouth kind of drops open. And, his mouth is kind of tight-lipped, so maybe it's just a somber moment of
I mean,
thought.
he's sleeping. It's been reported by multiple press outlets.
I was in the
that
courtroom
he's
today,
sleeping.
and I could see why someone would fall asleep, just like George Conway fell asleep today in the court hearing. It's kind of slow in there. It's not as exciting as the House Oversight Committee, but I just wanted to say that's a lovely picture you have of President Trump, Mr. Garcia. Thank you, and I yield.
I was mayor of Long Beach for the last 8 years. So we have a large public health department. It's a city about 500,000 people. So I saw firsthand the impact of our vaccine rollout and how important it was to public health. Our region and broader LA County was hit really hard during 2020, 2021, during that winter surge. Of course, before vaccines were available, our regional healthcare system was at a breaking point. ICUs were full. On certain days, we were losing dozens of lives across LA County. It was a horrific experience. In my city alone, we lost 1,300 people from our community. We know that across the country, we've lost over 1.3 million American lives. One of those lives was my mother. Another was my stepfather. I know the impacts of this pandemic and how destructive it can be on families. I want to remind us that during that time, even there was a regional quality health index around on the quality of air, and the amount of crematoriums that were actually having to be in operation were damaging health air quality. That's how horrific the time was. And I think it's important to remember how bad the pandemic actually impacted us, because I think we have a tendency to forget the lives impacted and the real impact to our economy as well. We did everything we could to get folks vaccinated in Long Beach. We were the first city to vaccinate 99% of our seniors in California, the first city in the state of California to vaccinate our teachers. Both the governor and the president called our approach a national model. But I'm very concerned about the attack on vaccination efforts. I'm very concerned when folks within the Congress, even on this committee, put out disinformation about what vaccines are. There are 3 million Americans today that are likely alive thanks to vaccinations. We know this. And despite this, many of our colleagues in the majority have chosen to undermine COVID vaccinations in general. I want to also point out that misinformation hurts our efforts. We know that Republicans in general are 2.5 more times likely to believe misinformation, and studies have shown that states with higher vaccination rates have had significantly fewer COVID deaths. So these are facts. I want to share some examples of this harmful misinformation today and the rhetoric that has actually led to, I think, a huge public health emergencies in this country. This is the first one tweet that's actually been sent out by a member of this committee, which essentially says that we're suggesting that COVID vaccines are associated with nearly 6,000 deaths and actually encouraging folks to not get vaccinations. Dr. Tan, what do you think about this claim about the 6,000 deaths around vaccinations?
Well, in this country, we have a very, very robust vaccine system that looks at all the different potential adverse effects that may be associated with vaccines. So the problem is that some of these deaths, even though they are reported, it may have been the vaccine was given, but the death was not due to the vaccine itself.
Absolutely right. And to say no, do not get the vaccine is completely irresponsible. Would you agree with that?
I agree.
Dr. Tan, I also would like to go to the second.
The gentleman will suspend.
I'm just clearly pointing out facts from public
The
statements.
chair reminds the gentleman from California to observe proper decorum. The issues we are debating are important ones that members feel deeply about. While vigorous disagreement is part of the legislative process, members are reminded that we must adhere to established standards of decorum in debate. Remarks of that type are not permitted by the rules and are not in keeping with the best traditions of our committee. The chair will enforce these rules of decorum at all times and urges all members to be mindful of their remarks.
Because we customarily, throughout the Congress, will take quotations and quotes and use them once they appear in the public record, I think this is in keeping with that, and I don't think this was an effort to disparage, but an effort to instead point out what a particular member or members of this committee may have put out themselves in the public space that we all refer to as social media.
At this point, it is the ruling of the chair that the gentleman may proceed. However, I remind the gentleman to be cautious and to understand the decorum as he proceeds with his remaining time of 1 minute and 46 seconds.
Thank you very much. I'll just read the next few public statements. I appreciate that. This tweet actually says that vaccinated employees get a vaccination logo just like the Nazis forced Jewish people to wear a gold star. Vaccine passports and mask mandates create discrimination against unvaxxed people who trust their immune systems to a virus that is 99% survivable. Do you think that this tweet, which compares vaccinated people to Jewish folks living under the Nazis, what kind of impact would this have, you think, on public health?
I think it would have a negative impact on public health, and I respectfully disagree with that particular sentiment that has been put forth. I mean, we know that vaccines are life-saving, and they should be made available to everyone so that there's no disparity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tan. I really appreciate that. I think it's really important for us to remind the committee and the public about public statements that are made by members of this committee, particularly as questions are asked. And so thank you very much all for your service. I yield back.